Well, good morning, and appreciate you coming out here for this presentation. So, if you're in the late 50s, 60s like me, you probably remember the movie Dr. Strangelove. And the subtitle to Dr. Strangelove was How I Learned to Love the Bomb. And this is all about nuclear warfare, and it was all about satire and anti-war. Well, I was thinking about how much cybersecurity impacts small businesses today, and it's pretty similar to what I remember in the 70s about the whole idea of the nuclear warfare, which is like, it's probably part of our lives, we have to learn to live with it, but we don't necessarily have to like it. So I was kind of looking at this as, you know, how can you fall in love with cybersecurity and not treat it as a nuisance, but treat it as something that really becomes an integral part of your business. So I'm going to talk about NIST 800-171 compliance. How many of you do business with the federal government or the Department of Defense? If I can get an audience. And how many of you just are small businesses that are just concerned about cyber security and data? Okay. So I'll try to blend those two a little bit, because one of the most important things is that cybersecurity compliancy is being driven by the government, and the deadline was 8 months ago. Technically, if you're doing business with the government, you're required to be 100% compliant or some version of that. The government is somewhat giving flexibility to that, but as I'll show you throughout the presentation, it's not going away as some people had hoped. It's actually getting more and more intense. So I'm going to try to give you some practical guidance or lessons on how to ease that burden on small business. Okay, so just to kind of set the stage, because it's almost some of the basic concepts. So how many of you think it's possible for you to be 100% secure? Raise your hand. Okay. And how many of you think it's possible to be 100% compliant? Okay. So I want you to think about that, because they're related, but they're not related. And when I finish, I'll tell you what I believe is the art of the possible between security and compliancy. So I'm going to cover the threat to small business, the risk management framework, which is the basis for today's cybersecurity compliancy, particularly with the government policy. I'm going to cover NIST 800-171, which is the standards that are defining your security controls, and then the DFARS, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation guidance, which follows the NIST in terms of any RFPs or anything that you choose to bid on. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about where the large prime perspective is on this, and what I've learned talking to a lot of small businesses. And from that, give you hopefully some practical guidance or tips on things you can do to become more secure and more compliant. And I'll talk a little bit about GDPR, which is the compliancy standards that are being driven by the European Union. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but I'm going to give you enough information that if you want to do some extra research, this really only applies to a small segment of you at all, and I'll discuss the impact that that'll have on you. So the research for this presentation. So Sudo Lynx is a 10-person company. We were formed in March of last year, so we've been in existence for about 18 months. And we have gone down the cybersecurity compliance journey. And I can tell you, it took us 10 months to build it. We are 100% compliant. We do this for a living, but it just was not easy. And we learned a lot from going through that. So as a small business owner, I can definitely empathize with some of the things that you're going through, because the challenges are pretty intense, particularly if it's easy to get secure to a point, it's difficult to get compliant. But we'll talk a little bit about that. So we've also talked with a lot of government contracts officers, We've talked with the Defense Security Service. I'm going to tell you what their role is going to be in cybersecurity. This will be something new because it just happened in September. We also are working with Air Force A6 to help define the standards, not just for the government, but also for industry. And then finally, I'll give you some observations and recommendations based on probably talking to 5 large prime companies and about 100 small businesses. And from that, I've tried to just the most important things that might be of benefit to you. So I don't know if you can read this, but it's an HR person saying, we couldn't hire the cybersecurity candidate you sent us. He was saying too many scary things about our computers. And if you're like a lot of small businesses, you're really good at what you do, but cybersecurity may be something you don't have a background in. And you may not even have an IT person on staff, let alone a cybersecurity person. And you're looking at, you know, when Mayor Southers was talking about the average salary for a cybersecurity person is about $101,000. Well, if you hire that person, that's $100,000 that's coming out of your indirect or something to pay for that, right? So it's not easy, and you're probably getting bombarded with a lot of vendors that are giving you different tools and experiences and to help you do your assessments and all that. And all I can tell you is get as smart as you can and try to make your decisions based on hopefully the best advice that you can get out there. Talk to other small business partners and see what they're doing. So this is my only boogeyman slide. So the Denver Post came out and said essentially that 4 out of 5 small businesses that have been hacked go out of business within 6 months. And there are some other ramifications associated with that. One is a lot of small businesses think they're too small to be attacked, but in fact, you're actually the most vulnerable victims that they go after because you're the least likely to make the investments and put in the infrastructure to be able to protect against some very basic malware or ransomware kinds of attack. So the bottom line is, for every dollar spent on cybersecurity, 99 cents are going into forensics and after incident response, and only 1 cent, 1 penny, is going into prevention. And we've got to turn that around, because if we don't, it's not a question of if you get hacked, but it's really a question of when you get hacked. Thanks to Rich Peters, another one back there. He does cybersecurity for the Pikes Peak library system, does a great job. He showed me a recent Facebook account of Colorado Timberline, which was incorporated in about 2004, and I see them on Amazon and everything. They sell clothing online to Amazon and other users. And they announced on Facebook that they have terminated business a month ago because of a malicious ransomware attack that they couldn't overcome. So this is a business that has been around for about 13 years, employs people, does good products, puts out a good product and everything, and they are now out of business because they didn't put in the infrastructure to be able to protect their data and their customer data and their financial records and things like that. I'm not sure what the ransomware was, but they're not the only company in Colorado that's been affected by ransomware. So, if you're doing work with the government, and if you're just trying to better understand why we are where we are today, the government has gone from essentially an annual paperwork exercise where they were providing updates on their security posture to one of continuous monitoring, daily monitoring. And this all happened in 2014. Do you know what the incident was that created the change in this transition? Anybody want to take a guess what happened around 2014? OPM was one of them, but it was this guy, Edward Snowden. For the most part, everybody was looking at threats as an external threat coming in and was not really thinking about the insider threat, the disaffected worker, the disgruntled worker, the worker who's willing to sell information to competitors as industrial espionage. So Edward Snowden exposed something to us that we kind of knew was there, but kind of chose to ignore. And what Edward Snowden was able to do at the National Security Agency was he had both system administration privileges, right, to be able to keep the network up and running, and he also had cybersecurity permissions. So he was able to access data, steal the data, and then, because he was also a cybersecurity person, was able to go in and mask any of the logs or the activities to be able to prevent anybody from seeing the malicious activities that he was conducting. Which, by the way, is one of the biggest challenges you're going to have as a small business owner. Even if you have an IT person on staff, or even if you outsource your IT services, that system administrator cannot be your cybersecurity person. That's a violation of government policy. So right away, you're starting to kind of say, well, I have to have an IT person and a cybersecurity person, and that's actually true. Now, you can outsource those functions, and we actually do that as a service. I won't talk about what we do. I'd be happy to meet with anybody afterwards. But for the most part, this is one of the biggest challenges that we have to face, not just external, but internal threats as well. So, when you're doing cybersecurity, there's two things you have to balance: the technical solutioning, the hardening of your networks, the protection of your data, with all of the policy letters and documents that you have to provide to be able to do this work. So, this right here, this is 300 pages of what policy letters look like. So within this book, for us, this is our compliancy paperwork. We have the system security plan, we have the incident response plan, we have 14 policy letters, and we have a system control traceability matrix, which is an Excel spreadsheet. This is what took 10 months to build, because in order to build a secure system, a compliance system, you also have to do all the paperwork that goes with it. It is quite onerous. There are templates you can get. A lot of people will provide them to you free to help fill out, but it requires a significant amount of investment to be able to do these things. Now, I'm gonna tell you, and I'll tell you again, and when I summarize it. If you're a small business owner, to get compliant is a little complicated. It takes an investment of time, but to be more secure, to mitigate your risk, there are some very easy things you can do, all right? I'm going to tell you 3 of them, because what you're trying to do is mitigate risk. You may not be compliant, but if you're worried about your customer data, your proprietary information, you're worried about your financial records, there's 3 things that you have to do, and they follow a criteria that we call confidentiality, integrity, and availability. All right, so here's the first thing I encourage you all to do, and it has to do with the security control that is access control, or AC. And this has to do with who has permissions to see the data that you have on your network, okay? There's a very simple thing you can do here to really improve your security, and that's called multi-factor authentication, all right? If you're doing any business with banks or anything like that, you've probably already seen that, right? Like you get the little pictogram with, you have to find the storefront or the cars or whatever, all right? So your password that when you log on is single-factor authentication. If you just increase the number of access controls by just 1, you will dramatically cut down the ability for people to get into your network, all right? So one of the ways you can do that is over the phone authentication. I don't know if any of you do that, but essentially you register your phone with your login, and the company that's tracking your controls will actually send you a code that you type in, and it's called OTP, over the phone, and that will get you the authentication you need. There are some other little techniques you can do, like, for example, many of you have had to fill out, who was your best buddy in high school, what was the name of your first dog, all that stuff. Well, that's a form of multi-factor authentication. So do that. That's a really easy fix that you can implement in your company. The second thing that you can do is to worry about data at rest, okay? And data at rest is the data that you have stored within your system, whether it's on your hard drive or whether you've got it riding in the cloud or something like that. So data at rest is really important to protect your data, and I am recommending that you get with a cloud service provider who has built-in controls to protect the data that you're putting into their cloud. There are two that are certified by the government, Amazon and AWS and Microsoft Azure. We use both. Amazon AWS has a lot of very good capabilities. The reason we use Microsoft Azure is because it is Windows-based. So if you're using a Windows operating system, the Microsoft Azure cloud kind of hooks up to it a little bit easier, all right, if you're just looking for ease. So it is really easy to store your data in the cloud. If you already have an iDrive with Office 365, I would highly recommend that you upgrade your operating system to Office 365 for the third reason. And the third reason has to do with securing data in transit. And that has to do when you're transmitting data. And the most common form you're going to do that with is email, okay? If you use Office 365 and you use their encryption algorithm, you will be able to provide data in transit security and greatly enhance your capability, all right? So those are the three things I want to leave you with, right? Get your systems to a multi-factor authentication for all your employees. It'll take an extra 30 seconds to get logged in, but let me tell you, it's worth it. Look at a cloud service provider, okay? And then upgrade your systems to Office 365. You'll be very glad you did. And the encrypted email in Office 365 will make a huge difference for you. Now, when you're actually dealing with the government, there is a 6-step process to be able to secure your data. And where the transition from the annual kind of paperwork drill to the continuous monitoring took place is that everybody kind of can do step 1 and 2, which is just sort of an assessment. You get to step 3 where you have to implement it, and where everybody gets hung up is on the continuous monitoring service. And I really don't have a solution for you because we know the tools that can get you there, but they're really expensive. But they can actually audit all your logging activity that's going on continuously and provide you with kind of a constant feedback on what's happening with your network. So this is really the challenge where in order to get compliant, you have to be able to say you do continuous monitoring, and most small businesses can't say that. So that's a challenge. Part of the reason why I'm a fan of outsourcing this is because there are companies out there who do that for a living and provide that to you at a cost that you can't do organically. So I'm going to go real quick through this, because this is actually what the NIST has been providing as far as guidance, and we've attended almost every NIST presentation, and it really hasn't changed in the last 2 years. So the big deal here is that they've broken up the security capabilities into 3 segments. One part of the pie is it's owned by the government and it's run by the government. The second pie is it's owned by the government, but contractors actually do the work. And the third segment of the triad is contractors or people who do business with the government and what they're required to do. And what they've essentially done is they've taken a policy that has about 1,400 controls, and they boiled it down to 110. So they've essentially acknowledged that for small businesses, well, let's try to get down to the most important security controls that you have to implement. The problem is that when they took out the 1,300 and boiled it down to just 100, they're all high level kinds of requirements. So they all require a little bit of an investment. And the big picture from the NIST are two things. One is you have to be able to show that you can protect the data. And number two, you have to be able to show that you have an incident response plan, that you will report incidents within 72 hours. That's really the two things that you have to do to be compliant. There are, I talked about access control. So for example, this is where your multi-factor authentication comes in, but there are really 14 families of controls that you have to do, and they're not all network or cyber related. For example, physical access. If you have a facility, do you have someone who checks people in and out of your facility, like visitors? And do you have a log for visitor control? That is actually one of the criteria that you have to comply with in order to be compliant. And just to give you an idea, this is just one control that you have to follow, which has to do with multi-factor authentication. You actually have to go through all of the language. There's 110 of these to see if you're actually doing what's required. And what the NIST is saying, the most easy thing you can do are two things. One is that you have to take all the data you want protected and segment it somewhere on your Active Directory or on your network, okay? So if you have an Active Directory and you have your file system set up, create a file that contains all your protected data. And if you have multiple sources of data you want protected, like you want all your HR records protected, put that in one folder. You have proprietary technical data that you don't want to share with your competitors, put that in another folder. And if you have government data you need protected, put that in a third folder. And so you have three folders where all the data has been kind of compiled, and then you lock down those folders, all right? That's essentially what has to happen. A lot of small businesses are thinking that your entire network has to be locked down. I can tell you right now that all of you who are on the internet and have laptops or desktops, they're already infected. They're all considered dirty. It's a question of how dirty are they. But they already have things in there that are slowing down your operating system and possibly being monitored or probed by others. And so you really don't want to put a bubble wrapper around something that's already infected. What you want to do is, within your infected environment, just create a secure domain on how to do that. One of the recommendations we have is that you download VMware. If you know what VMware, it actually virtualizes another laptop on your laptop. And you could actually create, for $250, you could download VMware onto your laptop and set up a directory within that VMware and put all your restricted data in there and restrict the number of people who get access into that virtual environment, all right? It's not more technically complex than that, but if somebody wants to talk to me afterwards, I'd be happy to tell you a little bit about that. And then the DeForrest Clause, it's 7008, 9, 10, 11, and 12. It depends on what the contract specifies, but if you get an RFP from the government, I can guarantee that there's probably some kind of cybersecurity clause built into there, and it basically follows the same guidance as the NIST. It says you have to be able to show you can safeguard data, and you have to be able to show that you have an incident response capability. So at the end, I'm going to give you some suggestions. And one of those suggestions are that you drive the conversation with the government, okay? Because you're going to find that if you just, let's put it this way, after an hour of listening to me or doing a little reading, you're actually going to know more about cybersecurity than the contracts officer that you're having to work with, okay? I'm serious, because I'm going to tell you some feedback that I've gotten from them. So I will get back to this, but I can tell you that you can drive the conversation and define what is classified as unclassified, controlled unclassified information, unclassified controlled technical information. There's like 3 different types, but they're essentially unclassified data that the government thinks is sensitive. You have to define what that is. What?
They think it's sensitive, but
right.
I'm the one that's created the definition. So
right.
There's a conflict here.
Well, I think the conflict is that the government, the contracts officer will stick this DeForrest clause into the RFP and just make it, provide it as a checklist requirement that they've complied by putting it in the RFP. And it's not the contracts officer who really can tell you what data is and what data isn't. You have to go to the technical person who is responsible for that contract and say, what is CUI to you? For example, a monthly program status report that is just labor hours, right? And the cost of that, is that considered CUI?
I don't know.
Well, and the government doesn't know either. There's actually a scorecard that they haven't updated recently, but when you're a contractor and you get your performance report, it's called a CPAR, Contractor Performance Assessment Report. There's an organization that tracks all of your report cards, and they're also tracking DeForrest Clause 7012 compliance. And the only reason I wanted to show this to you was that it's hard to read, but these are all different Army, Navy, Air Force organizations. And as you can see, as you kind of go to the right per quarter, they're all trying to get into the green. So from a contracts officer perspective, they're just trying to show that over 91% of their RFPs have cybersecurity clauses built in. So they're incentivized to put this clause into the RFP, so you won't see this going away. The other thing that's kind of interesting, and it's kind of hard to factor this in, but what happens if you bid on a proposal and you're not 100% compliant? For every deviation, it's called a POAM, or a plan of action and milestone. So if you aren't compliant, like you don't have multi-factor authentication, but you write it up and say, yeah, I realize I don't have multi-factor authentication, but I plan to have it within 3 or 6 months. You can actually document that, and you can POAM quite a bit of your controls, but eventually you're going to have to fix them. But what happens at the government side is, if there's 2 proposals, and one is 100% compliant, and the other one's like 95% compliant, the 95% compliant that proposal has to go to the DoD CIO for adjudication, and they're supposed to turn it in 5 days. Well, guess what? That's never going to happen. So if you're a contracts officer and you see if you see 2 proposals that are kind of similar, and one is really good cybersecurity and one is so-so, well, I think the one that's good is probably going to get the award, because there's less things that the government has to do to fix it, all right? So right now, I don't have any evidence of anybody not winning a proposal because they're not compliant, but I think eventually those things are going to start to happen. Right now, and I'll show you some recommendations that we've given the government, I'm concerned that there are companies who are really trying, and then there's other companies who aren't trying. And the companies who are trying are not necessarily being rewarded for their efforts. And in fact, they may actually lose contracts because they're building their cybersecurity controls into their cost, right? Their cost basis. So right now, the government essentially says, if you have a DeForrest Clause requirement, it's kind of like, there's a DeForrest Clause that says you have to bid qualified people for this contract. Do you know how much time a contractor looks at that before he checks it off? Like 5 seconds, just as quick as he can sign it. Because everybody bids qualified people, so that's just kind of a no-brainer, yes, check it off. Well, cybersecurity can be done the same way. If you convince yourself that you're secure, compliant, you can say yes, and the government's not going to check right now. And the only way they're going to check is if there's an incident. Well, guess what? If you're going to fudge that you're compliant, why would you report that you've had an incident, right? So we've had discussions with the government that your current policy sucks, and that there's no way, it doesn't help the contractors separate the ones that are doing it from the ones that aren't doing it. So the only incentive I can give you is try to do the right thing, do as best you can, and it's kind of my summary. Don't do it just to win a contract. Do it because it makes your company better. And your reputation and the protecting of customer data or your own data incentivizes you to try to do something. The more layers of defense you build, the more likely you're going to prevent an incident from happening. So this is kind of interesting. So there's a report by MITRE that was released a couple months ago. It's called Deliver Uncompromised. You can find it on the internet. I highly recommend you look at it because it's all about supply chain integrity. And what MITRE has done is essentially put out a report that said the weakest link in contractor services is in the small business, and it's usually somewhere within the supply chain where the vulnerability is for the entire team as well as the government in terms of penetration and access from the Chinese or criminals or whatever. And essentially what this report is saying, now how much push this is going to get within the government, I don't know because it's just been released a couple months ago, but they've made some very strong recommendations. And one of the recommendations they're making is that they want to create a fourth pillar for evaluation purposes on contracts, all right? Most of the time, they'll evaluate cost, performance, and schedule, maybe past performance, and they'll say, okay, 50% technical, 25% past performance or whatever. They're essentially trying to get the contracts, the government contracts personnel to assign cybersecurity as a fourth pillar. So it is possible, hasn't happened yet, but it's possible that at some point you may be evaluated, a certain percentage of your proposal may be evaluated based on your cybersecurity posture and how compliant you are with the NIST and the DeForrest guidance. This is making its rounds within government right now. All I know is the government is instituting stronger measures. Whether they ever go to this is still kind of unknown. So what are the large primes thinking about? Well, large primes are really scared to death about, not themselves. They've spent the $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 to get secure, and compliant, I mean. But, you know, a Lockheed Martin or a Boeing has hundreds and hundreds of small business partners, and the loss of the Lockheed Martin F-35 technical data, which was unclassified, that information that was stolen by the Chinese, in fact, they have a version of an airplane that looks like an F-35. Wonder where that came from? The loss of all the F-35 technical data did not come from Lockheed Martin. It came from a really small parts supplier in Australia who wasn't secure, and the Chinese were able to burrow through them to get all the way to the Lockheed Martin databases. So this is the kind of stuff that really gets the government's attention. The primes recognize that contract awards may be dependent on on their small business partners' compliancy. So the more compliant you are, the better. Anybody use ExoStar as kind of a data place, so ExoStar is kind of a middleman between Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, and small business providers. And ExoStar spends a lot of time on webcasts and everything and I'm an ExoStar supplier for Lockheed Martin. So I've had to go through this drill. And what they're trying to do is they're pushing the smalls to get as compliant as possible, but they're all kind of doing a little bit different. So I'll kind of tell you little vignettes or case studies. So company A actually has gone out and hired cybersecurity assessment companies to help their small business partners at least get through an assessment to figure out just where their vulnerabilities are and help point them in the right direction. Company B has a really simple solution. They just give their small businesses a laptop that's been hardened, right? The endpoints have been locked down. And they essentially say, all information that we're transmitting will go only to this laptop, which you have somewhere within your company that your employees can access when they're looking at controlled unclassified information. It's a simple solution, but it works. Company C is asking, in addition to your liability insurance or your errors and omissions insurance, they're also asking you to buy cyber insurance, right? So they're essentially saying, well, if you're not going to be compliant, you're going to pay insurance to us to mitigate any damage. And I don't think that's the way to go, but that's kind of the trend that's happening in industry. And then Company D is another company that is essentially helping with checklists and trying to provide information. So there's no prime company out there that is paying their resources to help you get compliant, but they're all trying different ways to get there, and there's no industry standard. So I just wanted to show you that the primes are really looking at this, but the way they implement it varies greatly. So Flowdown Responsibilities. If a small business sub is not compliant and something happens, the prime is held accountable. That's the enforcement mechanism that the primes are starting to press on their subs. And a lot of the contractors, the webcasts that I've sat in, are saying, hey, you know, government, you've given us guidance, you've told us what to do, but you don't really help us with how to do it. There's no primer on how to do this better. And if you remember, the government doesn't really tell contractors how to do things. They just state requirements, and the requirement is get compliant. They're not going to tell you how to do it. Now it's starting to change a little bit, but we as contractors always pride ourselves in telling the government, don't tell us how to do things, just tell us what you need and we'll come up with creative solutions. Well, this one's a tough one. This one's a tough one. And like you had mentioned, I'm not sure the contractors who are making the effort are seeing the payoff right now. And that I put on the government, because the government has to incentivize and reward the companies that are trying. So, talking to small and medium-sized companies, and we've talked to about 100 of them. Most have not implemented the security controls to be compliant. Some just, it's beyond their means, and others just are kind of waiting to see if the government's really serious about this. So even though the deadline was December 31st of last year, I would say that 90+% of small businesses are still not compliant. There are people who think if they're using Microsoft Azure or Amazon Web Services as their cloud service provider, they think they're compliant. Or they use multi-factor authentication, or they use encrypted emails. They think they're compliant. No, they're more secure, but just doing those things do not make you compliant. And most don't have the means to do that, and I can tell you the cost, you can just figure it out yourself. In order to build something in 6 to 8 months or a year, if you hire people to come in and do it for you, you're looking at $150,000 to $200,000 in cost. And so right now, most of you are probably in a kind of wait and see and just hope to do better mode. So here's my observations from talking with the government. The contracts officers are some of the busiest people in the Air Force or the military, the government, and their knowledge of cybersecurity is about a half an inch thick, okay? Contracts officers are not cybersecurity experts. And the technical reps who support that contract aren't necessarily cybersecurity experts either. All they're doing is saying, it's a requirement, I'm sticking it in the contract, and I'm expecting the contractors to comply with it. But oh, by the way, I don't have a way to really audit or check on it. So I think you need to drive the conversation with your customer, define what is meant by controlled unclassified information. And my biggest fear is that, and you see this in industry, like with Target and others, they have incidents and they don't report it, which actually compounds the problem. So we need to get the government to encourage contractors to be more open and transparent. And most of the RFPs we see just have a yes/no criteria. There's not supporting documentation like this book to show that you've actually done the things. And you know, good word is, if you're willing to fudge your compliancy, then you might fudge your incident reporting. The 5-day DoD CIO thing is a joke. I keep asking the question, if you've submitted a proposal that requires that DeForrest clause and you believe you're compliant, but you lose, and the winning bidder might or might not be compliant, we encourage all our clients to file a protest. Because the likelihood is that if the government inspects the winner's cybersecurity paperwork, they will discover that they're not compliant, okay? What I'm trying to do is try to push the needle a little bit, both with government and contractors, to incentivize those that are trying to do it right. Now, I'll talk a little bit about the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations at the Economic Union. This really only applies under 2 criteria right now. If you do business with a European Union country, or if you have a European Union citizen in your workforce, okay? If you don't have that, then GDPR is just an exercise of watching Google and Facebook fend off lawsuits by the European Union, because right now, the Europeans are taking data protection and privacy much more seriously than the United States, okay? So they have the same criteria, 72-hour reporting window. 50% of small businesses, right, or any businesses really, are not meeting the GDPR standards. And here's the interesting thing. You're subject to a $20 million fine if any of your information gets compromised. So it's pretty stringent. Now, in the corner, so I accidentally downloaded this app called Calm. Anybody use Calm? Anyway, it's kind of cool. It has like background noise, like rainforests and seashores and stuff like that. It's supposed to help you relax and sleep better. There's actually a bedtime stories mode on this, and believe it or not, there is a bedtime story for GDPR. It is, I swear. It's this British voice, he's really calm, and he's talking about, once upon a GDPR. Okay, so it's a bedtime story. It's on my phone. I listened to it the other day, and I was asleep in 5 minutes. So let me tell you, if you do nothing else with GDPR, listen to this guy for however long you can, explaining. What? No, I was. So there is actually an app for GDPR, and it was kind of interesting because I actually have listened to it a couple times, and he's kind of boiled down. The executive summary itself is 110 pages, right? So it is just, just awesome, how big this document is. But I try to really boil it down to very simple terms, and if in fact you don't have any work with the Europeans or you don't have any European citizens, this is just something that's kind of interesting. But what I do recommend is, almost every tutorial on the web, you have to pay to get the tutorial. But if you go to YouTube, there's a WTF is GDPR and some other things that you can download for free. So rather than me trying to explain it to you, I just highly encourage you to just grab one of these YouTube, just do YouTube, Google GDPR and see what pops up. There's actually a 50-second trailer of this guy. So if you just want to see what it's like, it's kind of entertaining. But the main thing here is, if you're not NIST compliant, I wouldn't worry about being GDPR compliant because the GDPR is like NIST on steroids. So, everybody know what the Defense Security Service is, DSS? If you have any kind of classified work with the government, you go through an industrial security group, like OPM, but this covers both personnel and physical security. So if you have a facility security officer, that person actually has to work with the DSS. So like when you have all your clearances transmitted between companies and government agencies, through JPass, that's all managed by the Defense Security Service. And it's only for secret and top secret. But guess what? An OSD memo came down this summer that said, Defense Security Service is now going to start handling controlled unclassified information. This is really new. This is like less than 2 months old. And DSS is kind of, we did a presentation to them in September, and we told them a little bit, same things we're kind of telling you, where we think the challenges are. But essentially, DSS is the only group that can really audit or monitor industrial security compliance. So like if you have a SCIF or you have a secure facility or you use personnel security systems, DSS has you do a self-assessment and then can inspect you at any time. They've never done that for unclassified information, but they have been given the mission to do that now. So this is another enforcement tool that we think is going to happen down the road, that you could be subject to an audit by the DSS to see if in fact you're compliant. So we've talked to them based on feedback from small businesses, and one of them was, why don't you, like you put out little vignettes or something, why don't you help these small businesses with some vignettes on how to be more compliant, okay? The contracts officers really need a DSS service that's not the bad guys, but actually are good guys, and to help you with that compliancy. We also think that the contracts officers need to do a couple of things to help small businesses. One, don't make it a self-certification because it creates problems between those that are doing it and those that aren't. Do more than just make it yes, no. Actually show documentation, or at least in the proposal, state that the winner could be audited at any time before award, okay? We think this is really important to help those of you that are making the effort. And also, the DSS can help define these questions about what's CUI and what isn't. But again, my biggest recommendation is drive the conversation with the government. All right, here's my recommendations for small business. Work with the prime and the government to define what is actually CUI and what isn't. You'd be surprised how engaged they will be for you to define those terms for them. Invest in some cybersecurity tools, whether you're compliant or not. We've already talked about the top 3 that I highly recommend that you do. And for the government, the data you want protected, like HR, if you have HR records, you don't have everybody in the company has access to those, right? You shouldn't. So what we're recommending is limit access to restricted, unclassified information. That is an access control, and you can do that by just saying only you and you and you have access to these share folders. And do your homework between outsourced services and building your own solutions, okay? One of the things I believe in the next couple of years, how many of you use Paychecks or a payroll service, right? Okay, when I talk to small businesses, say, why do you outsource this? And the answer is, well, tax laws and things are too complicated and it's not a full-time job. Well, cybersecurity is the same way. So I expect in the next 2 years, more and more small businesses will start to outsource their continuous monitoring service to a service. I think we're the first ones that actually built one, but there's still uncertainty about whether that's the way to go or not, but I think that's the trend and that's where it's going. So defense in depth, another recommendation is don't just go out and slap tools together, vendor product A, B, and C and just make it happen. I highly encourage you to talk to somebody who actually is a provider of services that includes tools and everything else and expertise that goes into it. That's also kind of the way of the future. And what you're trying to do is build layers of defense. So again, kind of wrapping things up. The difference between cyber and compliancy is that no one should ever say they can be 100% secure, but you can be 100% compliant. We've done it. We know that all of those security controls can be implemented. And if you're 100% compliant, that doesn't mean you're secure, okay? That's the unfortunate thing. But for government purposes, you are compliant and you can bid on work. And we think that's really the way to go. So anyway, there's the summary. I hope this was useful, and I appreciate your time and attention, and good luck on your journey. Thank you.